At the start of season 17 on LFM, I noticed a couple of races that really caught my eye this season. And in week 6, we were able to tackle the first of them, Pro Series at Imola. Now, if you've been following the channel, you will know that I love Imola, and so does my car of choice, the BMW M4. But it wasn't going to be straightforward. 90-minute race, the longest race I have done in LFM to date, and really hot temperatures, 29 degrees. So looking after tyres and extracting speed on a car full of fuel is going to be a real challenge for me. But let's dive into qualifying. It's split 3, I'm door card number 19, and let's see if we can piece together a result in this one. So we're straight into the action here in qualifying, and this session is a session of 2 flying laps for me. Thankfully, with a busy track, I was able to find a bit of space at the start here, and after a safe 1 minute 42 flat, I was able to improve quite significantly on this next flying lap to a 141.225. A really good first flying lap for me, and as you can see, the traffic coming out of the pits was always going to be a bit of a problem mid-session. I'd get a little bit distracted there, making a big error on the next flying lap off into the barrier, but fortunately I was able to find again some more space out on track, and this lap here was my fastest of the session. Now I am currently in position number 3 as we begin this session, and I am quite hoping to overhaul a very small deficit to the second place car and start near the front of this grid. Obviously there's a few minutes left to go and an improving circuit, so there is a chance a number of drivers will get up and over the top of my current time. We're getting it round to the first sector here, coming through turns 5 and 6, and we're on par with our previous fastest lap. A little bit more time what could be found in that first sector, but I wasn't quite able to extract it. Now these 29-degree temperatures were certainly playing havoc on the tyres, and the car was very slippery compared to other sessions I've done here. So the idea of this lap was just trying to be really controlled and not missing any braking points, not trying to overdrive the car too much, and work my way up to the limit. We're coming down into turns 11, 12 and 13, and we're decent through the dip here, and as you can see, I'm a little bit behind my best time so far, but we're more or less there, and there was more time to find in this last sector particularly. Going to come through the chicane now, and you can see I'm really comfortable over the chicanes. McLaren on the outside, which didn't interfere with the lap, and that chicane sequence has put me now half a tenth up, which is where I was hoping to get to overhaul this second place driver. Now we're coming down into the final turn 17 and 18, and thankfully we have picked up a little bit of time there, but a bit of a slide on exit, and we are going to slowly start to lose that advantage as we come to the line. It's going to be super close to try and get into that provisional P2, and as we hit the line, a 1 minute 41.185 is just enough to sneak into P2. Still though, with 44 seconds on the clock, able to try and put in one final flying lap through the opening corners here, and as you see, already picking up just over a tenth on this lap, so I knew there was more time to find in this first sector, and the best time so far in this session was in the 1 minute 40s. However, big mistake going into turn 5 there, collecting that inside curb, and that is the end of my session, unfortunately. And as we come to the end of the session, I do manage to hold on to P2, a front row start here at Imola for this Pro Series race. Excitement quickly turned to nerves though, as we look to start this 90-minute race. Big load of fuel on, a big stint ahead of me, and this was going to be a hectic first lap. Holding speed, ready for the start now, and we're waiting for that green light, holding the full throttle and a bit of brake, and we get the green light now and a good reaction from me, and we actually get a nice little jump on the Ford that has started out of P1 and currently leading this race as we head down to turn number 1. However, on the outside, the Ford on the inside, I am slow through the second part of these opening corners, and the Aston Martin gets a nice run, having a bit of a gap behind. He gets a nice run through that opening sequence and immediately goes up the inside as we head down to turn number 5. I have to yield there, let him through, and also directly behind the number 33 Ferrari, he's looking really aggressive at the start of this race as we come down to the hairpin. Now, my only sort of goal for this first lap is to not make any big mistakes, not outbrake myself, not fire myself off track or making any large contact. A really tight field in these Pro Series races, so to lose 10 seconds and a funny mistake running off course would be absolutely diabolical for my 90-minute race. As a result, I'm probably a little bit overcautious. Going from qualifying to race trim, it's really easy to make those mistakes, so I'm playing it very much on the safe side, and that allows those cars in front to skip away, and this Ferrari behind has got lots and lots of pace on me, being far more confident on this opening lap. Out of the chicane, not too bad. That's the superpower of this BMW, pulling a little bit of a gap on that Ferrari, and that's going to allow me to be nice and cautious into the final corners here without too much pressure. But as you can see, that Ferrari definitely gains significantly in these last corners, and then my exit out of the last corner is not great. Initially, the grunt of the BMW gives me a little advantage, but that Ferrari definitely in the slipstream as we head down towards turn number 1. Finishing lap 1 though in P3, but under all sort of attack from this Ferrari. Now he's going to show the nose up the inside here, and I'm just going to try and hit my braking marker and see what happens. However, I brake a little bit too late, and we're going to be a poor run through the second part of this opening corners. And then once again, for the second time in 2 laps, I have a car on my inside as we head up towards turn number 5. Again, letting him slip up the inside there, but fortunately with a 1.8 second gap to the cars behind, and that is going to give me a little bit of breathing room to try and settle into this race. And even as I exit the hairpin, I'm giving myself a little bit of a pep talk here in the first few laps, telling myself calm the nerves and get into that groove. Later in that second lap, as we come through the chicane, we can see that the Ferrari in front is wasting no time at all putting an attack on that Aston Martin. Gets a good run out of the chicane, and he's now find himself on the inside line down into the final sequence of corners, getting the braking right there. And there's a little bit of contact as that Aston Martin tries to file in behind, but that Ferrari has serious speed, and it was definitely the right call to not fight him too hard earlier in that second lap. He's certainly looking like he's going to drive away from us in this first stint. Coming through now, and we're going to set a 143.92 second lap time, and the leader doing a 142.1, so he's already getting up to pace there in clean air. And this lap we really need to put together a solid time and find ourselves a rhythm in this race, otherwise we will continue to bleed time and bleed positions. Coming through the first sequence of corners, a good start to this lap. However, as we hit turn number 5, we collect that inside curb once again, and we've done that a couple of times already in qualifying, and now in the race. Not a great start, and that is certainly continuing to play on the mental state through this next phase. It's a long race, this one, and I was really keen to try and get some good laps in. Fortunately, as we start into lap number 5, we get a bit of a helping hand here. A mistake from the Aston Martin in front, very slow exit to turn 6, and enough momentum here from myself to get up the inside into the hairpin and reclaim position number 3. Fortunately, a good lap prior has also helped in terms of feeling like I'm in the right place on the road here. And over the next few laps, we actually pull quite a nice little gap on the cars behind, really falling into a groove, and we now have car number 28 behind us in position 4, a full 3 seconds back. Unfortunately though, I was not doing a particularly good job of holding on to that 3 second margin. A mistake there at turn number 5 on lap number 8 definitely was not the way I was going to want to go about this next part of the stint, losing nearly a second alone in that particular corner, and I was going to have a bit of a fight on my hands to try and hold on to this margin. On lap number 11 here, we are going to actually set the fastest lap of my first stint, and this was probably when the car felt its best during the stint. I was in a bit of a groove, having been 20 minutes into the race. The fuel was coming off and the tyres were still in an okay condition. We're coming down to the final part of the lap here, showing a 10th up. Not as good through these last couple of corners, however, losing a little bit of that time, but this was probably an indicator of what the next stint was going to do for me, and I was trying to take some mental notes about how the car was behaving through the first part of this race. We're going to improve to a 1 minute 42.197, and like I said, that was the fastest lap that I did in this first stint. Unfortunately though, what meant was that I had probably overconfidence for the next few laps of the stint, and I was going to overdrive the car a little bit, particularly down here at turn number 12, and that was going to allow the number 28 Aston Martin to really close in behind. Bit of a mistake again through turns number 6, and a big mistake here at the hairpin, and that Aston Martin was no time at all going straight up the inside and side by side with the run up to turn number 9. As you can see, he's well alongside there, and I'm going to have to let him go through turns number 9, and immediately the Bentley behind as well. Car number 24 is directly behind. We're overly cautious through turns 12 here, and the Bentley has a much better exit with a lot of speed momentum, and I'm really not feeling in a good place at the moment. Like I said, the last few laps have been really rough for me, and we let the Bentley go here. We give too much space as well, and just trying to keep it on the circuit there. That Aston Martin does a good job to not run into the back of me thanks to that driver, and we are able to just hold on here to P5, but immediately losing a significant amount of time through that lap and those two positions. It was a pretty rough moment in this first stint with still 27 minutes worth of fuel in the car. This was going to be a really tough next section of the race. So it was straight into defense mode at this point. We have just under 1 hour of racing still to go here, and really the idea for me was to try and trim up some of those rough laps that I was having and some of that overdriving. I did recognise I was overdriving the car, and with this Aston Martin having similar strengths to me, the best idea I had was to really focus on getting to the apexes and focusing on really good corner exits. I was getting a lot better through turns 5 and 6, and that was becoming a strong part of the lap for me. But that Aston Martin was always there in the mirrors, ready to pounce at any little mistake that I made. Fortunately though, I did not make any really big mistakes through this next sector, and started to find a bit more of a groove around this track with the temperature and with the tyres. Another example here of coming through turns 5 and 6, just a lot better on corner exit, and the Aston Martin was starting to have a little bit of a wiggle out of corners like that. But turn 12, for example, the Aston Martin was much stronger under brakes down there, and I was really having to make sure my exits were really good to avoid him having any proper run on me down to the chicane. The upside of all of that though was that I was actually able to really improve my pace, and as the Aston Martin behind started to burn its tyres off a little bit, later in the stint I actually began to pull a bit of a margin on those cars behind. This lap, for example, lap number 22, I come across the line and I'm only slightly above my best lap of the stint, and that's after all of the driving so far in this race. So my tactic of pulling back a little bit, focusing on those exits, was really starting to pay off here with 49 minutes of the race still to go, and I was very fortunate to get myself into this place. I got a lot more confident to the point that I was actually starting to catch the number 4 car in front, number 28 Aston Martin, and that was giving me some real confidence into the next part of the race. Now, as we get to the end here of lap number 24, that Aston Martin behind dives into the pit lane. He's committing himself to an undercut strategy, and with 8 minutes and 30 seconds of fuel left in the car, roughly 5 laps, I decide, considering my pace, to push on into the rest of the stint. Fortunately, the next few laps do go quite well for me, and able to set sort of low to mid 142s, and that gave me a bit of confidence that I could potentially stay in front of this Aston Martin during this undercut situation. Now, if you see on the track map, that purple P is going to be my indicative pit stop exit. It is set on the more lenient side for a pit stop time, so if I really nail this stop, I will be out in front of that number 10, as he's really close to that P on the track map as well. So pit stop time at the end of lap number 27, we get it stopped on the marks, nice and cautious with that tricky pit lane entry, and to be perfectly honest, I'm very relieved to get into this pit lane and get off this set of tyres and get into this next phase of this race. Really need to nail the pit entry here, which we do so. We're going to go straight up on the jacks here, and I was honestly very, very excited to get to this stage of the race in the position that I am, breathing out for the first time really in this race. Unfortunately, that little lapse of concentration leads to this mistake. The car drops and we go nowhere. I forgot to turn the ignition back on. I quickly realized my mistake, but we have lost a couple of seconds in the stop. The time that I have more or less saved by nailing the pit entry and the box entry. Real rookie mistake, and the consequence of that is as we come out of the lane, you can see there that number 10 Aston Martin sails by us at the end of the straight. It would have been really close had I managed to actually get out of the box as I should have. So a real rookie mistake there, and you just cannot afford to do things like that in the Pro Series race. Speaking of other things that you shouldn't be doing in Pro Series racing, let's jump ahead to lap number 4 of the stint, and once again I hit that inside curb at turn number 5, a very similar mistake to that I made at the start of the first stint. Feeling like a bit of a repeat there. Now I'm super fortunate that the BMW handles that sort of hit at Imola really well. I know other cars that would be a absolute spin, so I'm very fortunate in that regard. Now we're going to push ahead to 33 minutes and 30 seconds of this race still to go, and we have found ourselves in a pretty nice little groove here at the start of the stint. This lap in fact is going to be my fastest lap of the race, and as you can see I've got it just over a second to the number 15 BMW behind and about 3 seconds to that number 10 Aston Martin in front. It's been pretty steady for the first 10 minutes of this stint, but this lap in particular goes really nicely for me. The tyres have warmed up, I'm in a nice little groove here, getting through the chicane really nicely on this particular lap, and coming down the hill here, starting to encounter a little bit of lap traffic as well. Fortunately, none of the lap cars have caused any grief in this race, and nicely through these last couple of corners. You see the leader in fact has done a 1 minute 41.4 this lap, so a number of cars are finding pace at this top part of the race. The temperature has dropped 1 degree as well, which I'm sure is helping out in a little way, but a 1 minute 41.867 in this sort of temperature with 68 litres on board is a really good lap from me, and I was really happy with that one. Now 25 minutes of this race still to go. We're now 1 hour and 5 minutes into this race, and to be perfectly honest, I was quite ready for this race to be done with. As I said in my intro, this is the first time I have done 90 minutes of driving in a race at all on LFM, and particularly a circuit like Imola, which is really intense with all of its different braking points and the intensity of the lap in general. It was certainly starting to take its toll on me, and I was working really hard to stay focused during this stint. Now, this is the part of the race where it was a little bit back and forth with myself and the Aston Martin in front. We were slowly building a gap on the BMW behind, but I would often have a couple laps where the tyres were good and the rate times were good, and the Aston Martin, whose tyres were 3 laps older than mine, would be sort of out of sync with that. We'd have a point like this where I'd be coming up to 1.5 seconds behind, and then that would follow by a couple of good laps from him and some weaker laps from myself, and that would allow the gap to open up a little bit more. My big hope was that having that slightly fresher rubber, that at the end of the stint that Aston Martin's tyres would just fall off the cliff, and that would give me just enough of an advantage to get to the back of him and put a little bit of pressure on him at the very end of this race. It was definitely the gamble that I was taking, and I was trying to drive to that, not overdrive the car through the first part of the stint and hopefully have some strength at the end. Now we are 9 minutes and 38 seconds of this race still to go, and to be perfectly honest, my focus was really starting to wander here. It was mentally very tiring at this point, and overall I was having a real battle with myself to keep speed in this car. However, I was being rewarded here with a closing gap to this Aston Martin, and particularly the first part of the lap, I was definitely looking a little bit stronger, and as we got down to 7 minutes and 20 seconds to go, we have nearly got that gap to under 1 second. It was a good fuel of the fire for me, and it was really motivating me to try and finish this race off in a really strong way. Coming through the chicane this time, again, really nice in the BMW. I had absolutely no issues with the chicane this race, and we are still 0 track cuts in fact, with 4 minutes and 40 seconds to go. Coming down to the first set of corners here on lap number 50, and we are definitely closing that gap. It is now under 1 second, and we are coming up to the stronger part of the circuit for myself. There are some lap cars ahead as well, and we're probably looking at about 3 racing laps to go here. You can see he's really loose as he comes out of turn number 6. As we get down into the hairpin here, we go down to 0.6 of a second on the exit. We're as close as we've ever been in this stint, and as we come down into the following lap as well, once again a little bit of a wiggle out of turn number 5 and 6. So this is definitely the part of the track that I wanted to be looking at. 2 minutes to go and only 2 racing laps to go, and we come down to towards turn 12. A big slide from the Aston Martin there. He's loose on the grass, but he's able to gather it up and get it back to the circuit. Not close enough there, unfortunately, to get underneath and demand a bit of track space. You see a huge moment for him there, but he does gather it up nicely and gets back on track nice and quick. Coming up to the chicane now, and I was really smelling blood in the water here. I was really hoping for another mistake similar to that and hoping to be a little bit closer. As I said, there's only a couple of racing laps to go here, so this is sort of a final opportunity, and the hope was that if his tyres were going away, mine would just hang on for those few laps. Although it did feel like I was fighting with a blunt instrument at this point. The car was really loose, it was really hard to push, and I was really not sure how I was going to be able to demand any sort of dominance here with the tyres only being that 3 laps difference. It's not a significant amount on a track that is hard to pass on. Either way though, we were going to throw everything at this, and unfortunately a really weird little game stutter into the braking zone there, out braking myself as well. All a bunch of bad moments, and you can see I lose a significant amount of time through turn number 1 there. It was a bit of a disaster moment. This was the sort of thing I was trying to avoid all race long, and immediately I have to look behind as the dual 15 BMW begins to close up. Rough as well out of turn number 6 for me on that lap, and he immediately closes right in behind with the door card number 2 McLaren now directly behind that BMW. Also a very quick finishing car there, a car that actually started from the pit lane, so he was going to be a real threat in the latter part of this race. So we start here the final racing lap of our 90-minute Pro Series race at Imola, and with that big gap to that Aston Martin, it was all about just holding on to this P6 position with one final clean lap. Here we come to turn 1, nicely through there. Fortunately, no over braking in that particular corner, and we get to come out the other side here. Bit of drama ahead, we have a lapped car spun on the outside of turn number 6, and he's going to start making his way back onto track. Fortunately, I get past him there, but the car's behind, almost a moment with the rejoin there. But as you can see, that BMW is right behind me, less than a second, so I cannot make any more mistakes here in the latter part of this race. Coming up to turn number 9 for the last time, and in fact even the Aston Martin in front is definitely taking it easy on this final lap as well, obviously not feeling any pressure from behind anymore, and we're all just trying to make it to the end of this one. The person with the most pressure on them is that orange BMW behind, with the number 2 McLaren really close. As we come up and over the hill, you can see he's actually putting the pressure on down the inside towards the chicane. I get through the chicane nicely there, and that McLaren does in fact pull a move on that orange BMW behind, so I'm very lucky that this race wasn't 2 or 3 laps longer than it was, otherwise my P6 position was very much going to be in trouble. But coming through the last corners for the final time of this race, and I can honestly say that I am quite happy to finish this one off here. P6 on the line, managing to put probably as complete a race performance as I could do today, with all the challenges of a new race distance and the hotter temperatures. And to be honest, at this moment after the race, it was just a big sense of relief to not make any big mistakes. It was a really stoked moment for me. I was really happy with the performance. I was completely exhausted, mentally drained. This was a really tough one for me, but a really good learning curve. A lot of knowledge was learnt in this race, and I'll be able to take this into my future races for sure. Nice to finish that one off.
So guys, we did it. We've pieced together a result here at Imola in Pro Series. P6 on the line, and it got a little bit better for us. A penalty for the driver who in fact won our split 3 race meant that I got elevated up to position 5, a top 5 finish in LFM Pro Series. Now this certainly is a great result for me, and I've taken a lot of confidence from this event going forward in my racing. I was really proud of how I managed to learn on the fly how to manage the tyre on the BMW, and learned a lot about how it reacted to the hot weather over a longer stint. I was glad that I did not make any large mistakes, and I think that really helped in securing that P6 position on the line, particularly with some of the faster cars that were coming up through the field at the end of it. I have to say, if you are above 1700 ELO and above the safety rating, I truly recommend that you give these Pro Series races a go. Sure, it's not split 1 with all of the aliens, but there's great close racing and it really tests your abilities. No matter the result, I have always learned a lot from these races, and I think I will continue to do as many as I can to continue my skill improvement. Of course, the 145 ELO that I gained from this race was a great reward for all of that hard work, and there's a bigger story on ELO this week in week 6 with races at Hungara Ring, which I'll share in another video. Of course, I would love to hear from you. How do you think this race went? Let me know in the comments section below, and let me know how your first long race in LFM went. Did you learn a lot about tyres like I did? Love to hear that story in the comments also. If you like this content and you're new around here, please consider subscribing, but race hard, stay positive, and look forward to sharing more in the next video. Cheers.